Page 34, October 22nd, 2021. Hello all, and welcome to another edition of the Book Nerd Diaries. We're the chill, bi-weekly podcast that dives deep into the latest books we've crossed off of our endless to-read list. Please watch out for spoilers ahead, folks, and let's get our book nerd on. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. As this quote by celebrated poet Walt Whitman so perfectly states, to be human is to be complicated. Within all of us lies the infinite potential for both incredible good and unspeakable evil, and in the end, it's up to us to decide which path we follow. In our book for today, the immortal classic, The Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, one man tries to solve the riddle of the human condition forever through the power of science. By completely removing the darker aspects of a person's personality, he hopes to allow himself and all people freedom to live their life with a completely clear conscience. From these good intentions, though, comes a great deal of tragedy. As our book begins, we meet our protagonist, a mild-mannered London lawyer named Mr. Utterson. He is taking a stroll with his distant cousin, Mr. Enfield, when they pass a building that makes the latter recall a recent traumatic event he'd witnessed. Mr. Enfield had been passing by this very same spot not too long before, when he had seen a strange man tread right over a young girl who had bumped into him in the street without a single thought. The man, who was identified as Mr. Hyde, is promptly stopped by police as the girl is taken to a hospital for her injuries. Her assailant is fined £100 in damages to her family, which he promptly pays before going on his way again. The odd thing is, however, the check he hands the police is not from Hyde's bank account, but rather that of a Dr. Henry Jekyll. Dr. Jekyll happens to have been a long-time friend of Dr. Utterson's, and so the two men decide to promptly drop the subject as they continue their walk. When Utterson returns home, Enfield's story is still very much on his mind, and so he goes to his safe and pulls out the will Dr. Jekyll had entrusted to him. In the document, Jekyll leaves all of his earthly possessions to Mr. Hyde upon his death or disappearance. Highly bothered by his friend leaving his estate to such a cruel man, Utterson pays a visit to another member of their friend group, Dr. Lanyon, to discuss the matter. It appears, however, that Lanyon has not spoken to Jekyll in decades, due to his increasingly strange and disturbing behavior. Utterson then asks Lanyon if he'd ever met Mr. Hyde, to which Lanyon answers no. After this conversation, Utterson makes the decision that he simply must see Mr. Hyde with his own eyes. For days, he stands vigil near the building his cousin, Mr. Enfield, had shown him, and waits there until he finally sees a man of Hyde's description walk up to the front door. Utterson immediately crosses the street, not wanting to miss his chance, and surprises Hyde by striking up a conversation with him. Utterson mentions that Jekyll happens to be a friend of his, to which Hyde simply laughs and heads into the building. After this exchange, Utterson calls on Jekyll himself, but is instead met by a servant, who informs him that Jekyll is currently out. A few weeks later, he finally manages to talk to his friend while they relax after a dinner party together. He asks Jekyll why a criminal like Mr. Hyde is on his will, but Jekyll assures him that everything is well and asks him to drop the subject. A full year later, Utterson's fears are further deepened when a local maid witnesses a man by Mr. Hyde's description cruelly murder a man he had been talking with during a sudden fit of rage. Horrified by the sight, the poor maid passes out, and when she wakes up, she immediately calls the police. What makes the event even stranger is that an envelope is found on the victim's body, with Utterson's address on it. Utterson promptly heads to the local police station after finding out about the murder to seek more information. He discovers that he had been acquainted with the victim, whose name was Sir Danvers Carew, and he also confirms that the murderer was, in fact, Mr. Hyde. He accompanies the police to Hyde's apartment, but when they get there, the man they are looking for is long gone. Once more, the entire apartment is ransacked, and his checkbook has been burned, a clear indicator that Hyde is currently on the run. Utterson once more calls in at Dr. Jekyll's house to see if he knows anything, and Jekyll assures him that he refuses to have any more dealings with the despicable Mr. Hyde. To prove it, Jekyll shows him a letter written by Mr. Hyde, informing Jekyll that no one will ever see him again. Utterson, with Jekyll's permission, brings the letter back home with him. On examining it further, he makes a shocking discovery. Besides a few minor differences, Hyde's handwriting is almost exactly the same as his friend Jekyll's. From there, Utterson makes it his mission to find out the truth behind the connection between Jekyll and Hyde. But, as they say, sometimes the truth truly is stranger than fiction. With Halloween just around the corner, I wanted to choose an extra special story for this scariest time of the year. I went through a whole lot of lists and articles, trying to pick the perfect book for you all. After a lot of digging, however, I just randomly remembered that I had never actually read The Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I remember watching an Abbott and Costello film featuring Jekyll and Hyde when I was younger, and it felt like I already knew the basic Jekyll and Hyde story through cultural osmosis. For some reason, however, it just never dawned on me to study the source material until now. As such, I'm very glad that I got to remedy that here on the show for you, and take time to properly enjoy such an iconic work of horror fiction. One thing that I enjoyed about this book is how it seems to follow a format typically used in haunted house stories, although you could probably argue that this story is almost sci-fi. You start with our hero, Utterson, being told a cautionary tale by his cousin of a devilishly evil character who seemingly haunts a nearby apartment building. It seems almost like a standard campfire tale, designed to keep people away, until Utterson realizes just how incredibly true and close to home it is. It can also be sort of seen as a tale of possession, where the unfortunate Dr. Jekyll is slowly consumed by the specter of his own scientific curiosity. Through his ambitious experiments, he wishes to free himself of the guilt and shame that holds so many people back, by removing the things that he hates most about himself. In doing so, however, he tragically starts losing all the good parts of himself as well, until there is absolutely nothing left of the man he once was. In the end, though, this is not a story about ghosts or monsters, as much as Hyde could easily be classified as the latter. There are no jump scares here, and there isn't an awful lot of explicit blood or gore. Rather, this book is frightening, in that it provides a window into the very darkest corners of the human psyche. Every single one of us have had bad days, where we've said or done things we've deeply regretted. Making mistakes is just a part of life, and ultimately, learning from these mistakes is how we grow as people. Hyde, then, is a study of what happens when that growth is completely taken away. Just who would you become if you no longer feared the consequences of your own actions? If you never really learned from the mistakes you made, and never felt bad for the hurt you caused others? Of course, it's always incredibly awkward and painful to make mistakes, but how much worse would life be if we weren't all the wonderfully complicated, messy creatures we are? I would certainly recommend The Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde to anyone who is looking for a good introduction to the horror genre this Halloween season. It provides just enough chills throughout to keep you on your toes, even if you're already familiar with the story, while never going over the line into a total splatterfest. If you, like me, tend to be squeamish about scary movies, but are still looking to soak up the scary vibes of the season, then what better way to do that than with arguably one of the most beloved, iconic horror stories ever written. With that, everyone, we conclude our main discussion for today, but don't be scared. We promise we'll be right back here with more show for you after this very quick break.
Are you an author, fellow podcaster, or small business owner looking to spread the word about your product or service? Then let us help you. We offer a number of affordable monthly advertising packages in various price ranges. So if you'd like to hear your ad here in future episodes, please head on over to our page at ko-fi.com/bndpod and click on the Shop tab to see what works best for you. Again, that's ko-fi.com/bndpod. Then click on the Shop tab. We can't wait to work with you.
And welcome back, dear listeners. We told you we wouldn't be gone long. Now that we're on the other side of our break, it's now time for that nerdiest part of our show, the Trivia Corner. In this segment, we give you a trivia question related in some way or other to the book we've just read. And this time, our question is all about the author himself, Robert Louis Stevenson. Ready? Your question is, besides The Curious Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which of these beloved adventure stories was also penned by Robert Louis Stevenson? Was it A. Robinson Crusoe, B. The Call of the Wild, or C. Treasure Island? Your answer is C. Treasure Island. It's insane to think that one person wrote two very different stories that ended up becoming cornerstones of two very different genres. But apparently, Robert Louis Stevenson did just that, care of a legendary mad scientist named Dr. Jekyll and a mischievous pirate named Long John Silver. I only wish I had that sort of talent for myself. My source for this question was Wikipedia. This, wonderful listeners, concludes our special episode for today. Before we turn off the porch lights and put away the candy, we have to give a very special thank you to Julie and Katie, aka one of the very best sisters a podcaster could ever ask for being our amazing subscribers at patreon.com/bndpod. To get special treats like early ad-free episodes, 2 bonus episodes a month, and so many other perks without any of the tricks, please head on over and join them. You can also support us for absolutely free by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, sharing our episodes on social media, or telling the people in your lives about us. Small independent podcasts like ours depend on word of mouth to survive and help our community grow, so every little bit helps. Next week, Friday, October 29th, we're dropping a brand new bonus episode just for our $5 and up Patreon subscribers, and we'll see you right back here in 2 weeks to open another page of the Book Nerd Diaries. Catch you then! The Book Nerd Diaries is written, edited, researched, and hosted by me, Amber Wilchin. Thank you so much to the wonderful Astrofreck from Pixabay for the use of our theme song, The Grand Entrance, and One Tamara too for our incidental music that plays during the Trivia Corner segment. If you would like to connect with us online, please follow us on Instagram or Twitter at BNDPod, on Facebook at Book Nerd Diaries, or via our website at bndpod.wordpress.com. All the links you need are right in our show notes, so come say hi. If you have any comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes to send my way, please feel free to drop us an email anytime at bndpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, everyone, please be good to yourselves because the world needs you. And don't forget to support your local library.